All right, guys, we're going to do some notes on M1V1 and titration, which you probably have no idea what either of those things means. So the very first thing I want to do is define what titration is. Okay, titration is slowly adding an acid to a base to neutralize it while keeping track of the volume added. This can also be done adding a base to an acid. We use a titration to figure out the concentration of an acid or a base. Now, after we figure out the volume that we've used, we can use calculations to determine concentration. So there's an equation. We use the volume of added acid or base in an equation to help us determine the concentration of an unknown. Okay, of an unknown solution. So here is the equation. I'm gonna make it big and bold. Okay, here's the equation. M sub A V sub A equals M sub B V sub B. Okay, the capital M equals molarity. So we usually know the molarity, we have to know the molarity of one of our substances. The little a's stand for acid, so this is the molarity of your acid, okay? This one is the molarity of your base, so the B's are for bases. And capital V is volume, okay? It doesn't have to be in liters this time, it can be in milliliters for both of them. But volume of acid, volume of base. Sometimes, I'm gonna go ahead and go back down to my original font size here and just say sometimes you will see this equation as M1V1 equals M2V2, okay? And it's the same thing. As long as you're working with an acid and a base for our lab, we can do dilutions this way, but you're starting with a molarity and a volume and you're ending with a molarity and a volume. You're gonna know 3 of the 4 pieces and you have to solve for the 4th one. Okay, so we're gonna do some example calculations. So number 1, if you use 35 milliliters of 2 molar HCl to neutralize 70 milliliters of NaOH, what was the concentration of the NaOH? Okay, remember concentration is the same thing as molarity. So you have to bunch those 2 words together in your brain to get these problems, okay? So if we look at this, I'm gonna break this down by highlighting a little bit. 35 milliliters of 2 molar HCl. I'm going to underline that because that is all about the acid. I have 35 milliliters of acid, that's a volume of acid. I have 2 molar HCl, that's the molarity of my acid. Over here, I have 70 milliliters of NaOH. I'm going to, if I had markers, I'd just change the color, but I'm just gonna italicize that. I know the volume of my base, right here, VB. What I'm looking for is the concentration of the base, which is MB. Remember, H starts an acid, OH ends a base. So If you see H in the substance, that's your acid. If you see OH, that's your base. But you just have to group one volume with one molarity. And then we have a second volume, but we don't have a second molarity. So we can solve using this equation. Ooh. All right, so here's how we're going to do this. Ma is the molarity of the acid. So that's 2 times Va, volume of the acid, which is 35, is going to equal Mb, which I don't know. That's the molarity of the base. I'm going to put that in parentheses just to keep it really clear, times Vb, which I do know is 70 milliliters. Okay. If you haven't done this kind of math in a while, in order to get Mb by itself, we're going to divide both sides of the equation by 70. Okay, so we're going to have 2 times 35 divided by 70, and we're going to get Mb equals 1 molar. Okay, molarities are always going to be molar, so that's our unit. So the molarity or the concentration of this base is 1 molar. Okay. You're going to have several examples of problems like that to practice. Now, here's another way we can use this equation. Let's say we know the molarity of an acid, and we know how much we have. We want to know how much base we need to neutralize it. So here's another type of example. How many milliliters of NaOH would you need to neutralize 50 milliliters of 0.75 molar HCl? Now there's one more piece that I forgot to give you here. How many milliliters of 3 molar NaOH would you need to neutralize 50 milliliters of 0.75 molar HCl? So sorry about that. I forgot to give you that 3 molar piece. You have to have that. Otherwise, you can't solve this problem. Okay. But now let's highlight this. So I'm going to still use italics for my base. I know that my base is 3 molar. So I know that its concentration is 3. I don't know the number of milliliters. So I don't know volume of base. But I do know my volume and my concentration of my acid. Those things I do know. So I'm going to underline those. Those go together. So when I'm solving this equation, my molarity of my acid is 0.75. Remember, that's whatever has the capital M with it. My volume of my acid is 50. Is going to equal the molarity of my base, M sub B, Mb, is 3 times the volume of the base, which I don't know. So again, you're going to multiply 0.75 times 50, and then you're going to divide both sides by 3 in order to get that Vb isolated, get it by itself. So in your calculator, you do 0.75 times 50, then you divide by 3, and we get that the volume of the base, Vb, equals 12.5 milliliters. We would only need 12.5 milliliters of the base to neutralize all 50 milliliters of that acid. So that is the equation this is the second equation that we're going to have to use throughout this unit. So make sure that you have that, highlighted or starred or boxed or whatever you need to do to make it stand out in your notes. I've done one of each type of calculation for you. Now you're going to go on and calculate a bunch of examples on the next assignment, and then we will see you in class.